All right, let's dive into an idea that is so simple, but it completely flips how you see almost everything. It comes from Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene. And the core idea is this: we aren't really in charge. We are survival machines, incredibly complex robots blindly programmed to preserve the selfish little molecules we call genes. So let's start with the central puzzle this whole idea sets out to solve.
I mean, just look at the world around you. You see this deep, deep contradiction everywhere. On the one hand, you see these amazing acts of cooperation and sacrifice, and on the other, just brutal, savage competition. So which one is it? Are we and all living things fundamentally selfish, or are we wired for altruism? It's a paradox, and the gene's eye view is how we're going to make sense of it.
I mean, just think about these two extremes from nature. You have a worker bee that literally commits suicide, stinging an invader to protect its hive. The ultimate sacrifice. At the same time, you've got a black-headed gull that waits for its neighbor to fly off and then just swallows its chick whole for a snack. How can evolution possibly produce both of these behaviors? It seems impossible. The answer, it turns out, requires a massive shift in how we look at things.
There's this comforting idea that evolution works for the good of the species. It's a nice thought, right? But according to Dawkins, it's just plain wrong. The reality of natural selection is way more competitive. It's much better summed up by that old phrase, nature red in tooth and claw.
So, how do we begin to solve this paradox? Well, first things first, we've got to define our terms. When we say selfishness or altruism, we need to throw out the human psychological meanings we're used to. We need to get really strict, really biological about it.
And this part is absolutely crucial. These words have nothing to do with feelings or intentions. It is all about the effect of an action. If what you do lowers your own chance of survival but boosts someone else's, that's an altruistic act. If it does the opposite, it's selfish. That's it. It's purely about the outcome.
For a long, long time, the go-to explanation for all this altruism was something called group selection. And the idea is pretty simple. A group full of individuals who sacrifice for each other is just going to do better than a group full of selfish jerks. It seems to make perfect sense, right? Well, it turns out there's a killer flaw in that logic.
Just think about it. Imagine a group of total altruists where everyone helps each other out. Now, what happens if one selfish rebel appears? That single selfish individual is going to have a massive advantage. It'll exploit everyone else's kindness, thrive, and pass on its selfish programming. And over generations, that selfishness will just spread like wildfire until it takes over the whole group. A purely altruistic group just isn't stable.
And this is where the big idea, the gene's eye view, really comes into play. It asks us to make a huge mental leap. What if the individual organism, the bee, the gull, you and me, isn't the main character in the story of evolution? What if the real hero is something much, much smaller and way, way older?
To get this, we have to go back, way back to the beginning of life on Earth. You have this primeval soup of chemicals, and just by sheer random chance, a molecule forms that can do something amazing. It can make copies of itself. This was the very first replicator, and once it existed, its copies just started spreading everywhere.
So what made one of these replicators better than another? Well, it came down to three things. The best ones had longevity. They just lasted longer. They had fecundity. They copied themselves faster. And they had high copying fidelity. They made accurate copies. These successful little molecules, they're the direct ancestors of our genes. They're the true stars of this story.
Now, pretty quickly, that primordial soup got really competitive. The building blocks needed to make new copies started getting scarce. So to survive, the replicators started building things. Protective walls, defenses, they started building machines to live inside of. And those machines, well, they're us. Our bodies, and the bodies of every plant and animal, are what Dawkins calls survival machines. We are just the vehicles. We are built and programmed by our genes with one single purpose: to protect them and to help them propagate. They're the pilots, we're just a spaceship. And the process is strictly a one-way street. The gene is the blueprint, written in DNA.
Those instructions control how proteins get built, and then the proteins build a body. And here's the key. Nothing that body learns or experiences in the world can ever go back and change that original blueprint. The influence only flows in one direction. Okay, so now that we have this totally new lens, this gene's eye view, let's go back to our big paradox. How can these fundamentally selfish genes build individuals who behave in seemingly selfless, altruistic ways?
The answer is a brilliant concept called kin selection. See, a gene for help your family isn't just in your body. Copies of it are sitting right there in your relatives. So imagine the gene that programs you to sacrifice yourself to save, say, 3 of your brothers, you die. But from the gene's point of view, who cares? Each brother shares about half your genes, so the gene is just guaranteed the survival of about 1.5 copies of itself. For the gene, that's a fantastic trade.
We can actually put a hard number on this. It's called the index of relatedness. For full siblings, that number is 1/2. That means for any given gene in your body, there's a 50% chance that an identical copy of it is sitting inside your brother or sister. And this is why, from a purely genetic standpoint, saving 2 of your siblings is the exact same as saving yourself.
Now that relatedness drops off the further you go. For first cousins, it's 1/8. So the cold, hard genetic calculus says that a gene which programs you to sacrifice yourself to save more than 8 of your cousins, well, that could be a winning strategy. So what looks like personal sacrifice is actually gene-level selfishness.
Okay, but what about helping total strangers? Game theory gives us a great model for this. Imagine a population of hawks who always fight viciously and doves who always back down. A world filled with only hawks or only doves just doesn't work out. What's successful is a certain mix of strategies that, once it's established, can't be beaten. It's called an evolutionarily stable strategy, or an ESS.
Let's apply this to something simple, like animals grooming each other. Let's say you have 2 types: suckers, who will groom anyone who asks, and cheats, who love getting groomed but never ever pay it back. A population of suckers would get totally exploited by cheats, but a population of only cheats would be miserable since no one would ever help anyone. Neither strategy is stable.
But now, let's introduce a third strategy, the grudger. A grudger is smart. It starts out nice, it'll groom a stranger. But it has a memory. If that stranger cheats it, the grudger remembers, and it will refuse to help that cheater ever again. This strategy, be nice at first, but punish anyone who screws you over, this one is a winner. It's evolutionarily stable.
So all of this can sound pretty deterministic, right? Like we're just puppets dancing on the strings of our DNA. But the final part of this argument, and maybe the most fascinating part, offers a much more hopeful and uniquely human way out.
Dawkin suggested that there's a new kind of replicator on this planet, one that wasn't born from biology, but from culture. He called it the meme. And a meme is basically a unit of cultural inheritance, an idea, a song, a catchphrase, a style of clothing, anything that spreads from brain to brain through imitation.
And just think about the difference in speed here. Our genes built the hardware, our brains, but memes are like the software that runs on that hardware. And while genes evolve very slowly, over many generations, memes can evolve at the speed of light, jumping from mind to mind in hours, minutes, or even seconds. This is a whole new kind of evolution.
And this brings us to this amazing, hopeful conclusion. Yes, we are built as gene machines, but our brains have given birth to culture and consciousness. We are the only creatures on Earth that can actually understand our own selfish programming. And because we can understand it, we can choose to defy it. We can decide to build a world based on real, genuine, disinterested altruism.
So this leaves us with this one huge, profound question. Our genes built the stage. They wrote the first chapter of our story. But with the rise of consciousness and culture, there's a new power at play. The genetic replicators started this, but we, with our ideas, our culture, our conscious choices, we get to write what happens next. So the question is, who is in control now?